Hi, for my reading log, I chose The Great Frenzy book. It's by Janet Stevens and Susan Stevens. Janet Stevens is also the illustrator. Publisher is Houghton Mifflin Harcourt Books. Copyright date 2005. The genre is picture storybook / fable. There's 19 pages. The age group is 4 to 7, and they won the 2008 Bill Martin Jr. Picture Book Award. The story begins with a dog named Violet who drops a tennis ball down a hole of the prairie dogs. And so as the ball's tumbling down, all the prairie dogs are frightened and they're like, what in the world? And eventually Big Bark is the big prairie dog, and he comes over to the ball and he says, get out of my way. But Pipsqueak, before he could reach it, or before Big Bark could reach it, Pipsqueak goes out in front of him and pokes it, and she comes off with a piece of fuzz on her claw. And so she begins playing with it and stretching it. And then after all the other prairie dogs see this, they all begin coming, and the word gets around, and all of these prairie dogs are coming down and taking off pieces of fuzz until eventually the ball is left empty. Since some of the prairie dogs didn't get fuzz, or some had more than the others, everyone began raging just about the fuzz. And they just fought so hard that they all fell asleep. And after they fell asleep, a couple hours later, they wake up and there's no fuzz anywhere to be found. And as they're looking around, they hear Big Bark yell from above ground, I stole the fuzz. And as they all go up to look, Big Bark is just covered in all of the fuzz from all of the underground. Right as Big Bark is bragging about having all of the fuzz, this big bald eagle comes and swoops him up along with all of the fuzz. Since all of the prairie dogs are already kind of scared of Big Bark because he's obviously bigger than them and he's kind of mean, they're all shouting like, yay, we're free from him. But then Pipsqueak realizes that, hey, he's one of us, and so they shout for him to come down. And so the bald eagle, he finally squirms his way through, Big Bark does, and they all circle up and catch Big Bark as he plops down from the bald eagle. And this is when they all realize that they could use Big Bark in a beneficial manner, as there's a big bald eagle swooping by, so Big Bark can help it bark him off and keep the eagle away from all of them. And then they explained how the fuzz was trouble anyways, because they were fighting over it, and before that they had never fought. And so since it made them fight, they're like, oh, whatever, since the bald eagle has it, so now we're not fighting anymore. And so they all cheered once they were safe under the ground after the bald eagle came back and Big Bark barked him off. And so they all lived happily ever after. But on the very last page, there shows the dog dropping another ball down there. And so I can only imagine what will happen next. The illustrator mainly uses blues, greens, and browns. And so what I thought was cool is this page actually drops down just like that. And then also I really like the lime green on the tennis ball and how the illustrations take up the entire pages. So it was very lively. And the illustrations were done in watercolor. The theme of the story shows greed and friendship. Greedy because Pipsqueak, they were all greedy for the fuzz, and so they all began fighting over it, and then they started becoming friends after the fuzz was gone and the problem was gone, so they had nothing left to fight about. When Pipsqueak took leadership and said that they needed to save Big Bark because he was one of them, it just shows like in the classroom everyone is valued, and even though you might not like a student, everyone will do anything to help another student out. I had an experience like this story when I was in like 3rd grade, and the teacher gave us all Skittles and all laid piles out on the table, and one of the students in front of me stole 2 piles, and so one of the students didn't have Skittles, and so the teacher gave us a big old lesson about how you don't steal from others and how bad, no matter how bad you want something. And so this situation is just like the fuzz. Everyone is fighting over the fuzz, and so it caused chaos, and so this is kind of like the Skittles situation that I had when I was younger. For the activity, I would have my children draw or just explain something that they would drop down the hole. And so once they tell us what they can drop down, they would explain how they think the prairie dogs would react to that. For example, if they drop down like a toy car, then they could say that the prairie dogs would drive it or something. And I think this would be a very fun activity for students.